Hey guys, it's Diana. Welcome back to my channel, and today I want to talk about episode 5 of In the Dark. So this episode was called The Feels, and as I said last week, the promos basically led everybody to believe that this was primarily going to be focused on Jess and Murphy was going to be feeling some guy's dead body or whatever. That was part of the episode. So they ended up going to Felix's parents' house because his uncle was very sick and he was at the end of his life. I believe they had called in hospice or something. And so, Felix had taken a week off from Guiding Hope, and Jess wanted to go to be there for their friend. Meanwhile, Murphy was just there for her ulterior motive of trying to feel a dead body so she could compare it to Tyson's when, she found him in the alley. However, this episode started off when they were in the bar. It was just Murphy, and Dean had showed up, and they were talking, and he was going to try and help her with the case. And, he had started off by saying he had a lead, and then Murphy tried to hook him up with the bartender, which I guess, ended up being a thing. They did go on a date later in the episode. Dean did say that he's not a big drinker, and the bartender gave him a beer that he didn't like, but he was way too polite to say anything about it. So she then gave him a Shirley Temple. And, really, that's all that we get from Dean. He's a very small part of this episode. It does cut back to him later on the date, but I'm going to get to that later in this video. So Felix's parents, we find out, are very well off. They have a large house, and Felix is rich, and Murphy and Jess are just floored by this because he, doesn't act like it apparently, but he tells them that his parents are the ones who have the money. He doesn't want a dime from them. And they actually treat his siblings better than they treat him. And we learn later in the episode that he's just so devastated about his uncle dying because he was the only one in the family that really treated him like, he meant a lot and he was a great kid and took pride in his accomplishments. So we find out this episode does a lot of intercutting between various people and locations, and one of the things that we focus on here is Max and Darnell, and we find out that Max is Darnell's money boy, whatever the heck that means. Max kind of has something to do with the whole ring that Darnell is running, and Darnell keeps telling him that whoever that person was that he had talked to in prison a couple of episodes ago had said that Max needs to stop seeing Murphy, and Darnell is getting these orders from higher ups apparently that Max needs to stop, fooling around with Murphy, and Max lies and says that he's done and whatever, and, eventually Darnell finds out that he's not telling the truth, and he just decides to cover for him, as far as Darnell knows, Max is not doing anything wrong or whatever. I don't know. The whole thing with them really isn't a big focus at all in this episode. However, we do spend some time with Jules, who is the female detective, who I don't think we knew the name of until this episode. I could be wrong. Darnell wants to take her out of town on a date because, they can't really be together in Chicago because she's a cop and he's a big-time drug dealer. So they're in the car, they're going out of town, and Darnell gets a call saying that they're all set for that night or whatever, and, there's some big thing that they're going to be doing, and the call is on speaker in his car, so he switches it quickly to the handset, which, that doesn't fool anybody. Jules hears the whole thing, and then she gets mad because she has to pretend that she didn't know, even though, she's a police officer, so she's kind of contractually has to do something about it. So she gets out of the car, and she eventually finds her way back to Chicago, and there is a bust that happens later that night that they end up using Max's food truck for, to, hide everything and to leave Chicago to make this transfer or whatever because they figure it'll be less inconspicuous than Darnell's truck because the police know his truck or something. Basically, Darnell hides and Max is able to drive, past all the police officers or whatever, and Jules does something to, tip him off so they can get out of the area before anybody gets hurt. Meanwhile, we do find out that Tyson did work at a flower shop. It's called Clover and Flora or something. So they had gone to the flower shop, Jess and Murphy, they're going to all these different flower shops in the town, and the owner had said that Tyson used to work there, but then he left and nobody had heard from him, and Jess ends up buying some dahlias for Vanessa because they're her favorite, and Murphy just wants to get the hell out of there because she doesn't like anything to do with flowers. She thinks they smell bad eventually, and there's no appeal to her because, she can't see them. At some point, Murphy ends up talking to Max on the phone because Max had been trying to contact her this entire episode, and she had been avoiding him because she thinks that she is pregnant because her period is late, and she won't take a test, which is what Jess is suggesting to her the entire episode, that she takes a pregnancy test, and she's just very resilient and doesn't want to do it and doesn't even want to think about it, and just shuts down and tries to focus on this whole Tyson thing. Felix does end up overhearing that Murphy was only there to feel the dead body, and he kicks her and Jess out of the house and tells them to leave because he's understandably very upset about it, not realizing that that wasn't Jess's intention. She's actually wanting to be there for him, whereas Murphy just thinks about, trying to solve the whole Tyson thing. So Murphy ends up yelling at him. They get into a big fight. She calls an Uber and she goes back to Chicago, and she learns on her way home, while on the phone with Max, the Clover and Flora place is a front for drugs. And throughout this episode, we do get small flashbacks of Tyson and Darnell, and Tyson and the owner of the flower shop, going through and working and doing whatever. So Murphy, because she's an idiot, goes to this place and confronts the owner about the drug sale. And he obviously plays dumb and says that he doesn't know what she's talking about and tells her to leave. And it's then that she ends up getting her period and has to use the bathroom. And he says that it's for employees only or something. And she's like, well, I got my period. You have to let me use the bathroom or whatever. So he does. And that is actually what ends up saving her life, because as she's in the restroom, she hears people enter the front of the shop, and there's a confrontation between them and the owner, something to do with money or drugs or something, and there are gunshots. And there's this scene that was very poignant, I thought, of Murphy just sitting up, like with her legs up on the toilet seat, and she coaxes Pretzel to go up and sit with her, and she's just holding on to him, holding her breath, and petting Pretzel and holding him to make sure that he won't whine, because he's afraid, and so is she.
Pretzel, come in. Pretzel, come.
And the people who had fired the gunshots, they end up walking into the bathroom, and they stand there for a minute, and then they leave, not seeing Murphy. And then she waits and she goes back into the front room. There is a callback to the pilot in this situation where Pretzel won't let her go forward, which is what had happened when she was looking for Tyson in the alley and she found the body. He wouldn't let her go forward because there was a dead body. He won't let her go forward because there's debris on the floor, and the owner is laying on the floor with a gunshot wound in his chest, and he's dead. So Murphy, is taking little tiny baby steps while Pretzel is just sitting there not moving, and she's holding on his leash to keep a grip on him, and she ends up finding the owner on the floor dead. So she calls 911, which is the sensible thing to do, and they put her on hold. Cut to Dean on the date with the bartender. I can't remember her name. And she calls Dean, and she tells him what happened, and she tells him where she is, and he's gonna, call an ambulance, and tells her to look for a pulse, and she does. Well, she puts her hand on the guy's face, which isn't really looking for a pulse, but I guess she'd be able to tell if he was breathing, obviously, that way. And he's just dead. Then we cut to they're in the elevator in her apartment building, and they're just gonna deal with everything tomorrow. And Jess and Max are there, and they take Murphy inside and talk to her and everything. We seem like it's okay, but Murphy is talking to them and she just doesn't even know what to think, because the body that she felt was different than Tyson's. It felt like cold, because the guy was instantly dead, whereas when she had seen Tyson's body in the alley and had felt it to make sure it was him, it was warmer and it had been out in like below freezing temperatures, even though it was like wrapped up in a blanket or bag or whatever. That basically like led her to believe that maybe Tyson had just been asleep or unconscious or something, and then he got up and ran out of town. And this scene is intercut with the camera is at like the water or somewhere. I don't know if it's like a dump or what it is, but there's a group of people and they're all gathered around a bag, and they like a body bag, and they unzip it, and then it just shows Tyson's face, and he's like 100% dead. So basically he had been dead this entire time, and nobody believed Murphy because why would they? And it's just nuts, because Darnell had been telling everybody, oh yeah, he's just missing, he's fine, he skipped town, he's fine. So I don't know if that guy who's in jail like had sent someone out to kill him or what the deal is, because there's no backstory to that. But this is episode 5, and there are supposed to be 13 total in this season, and not counting the next season of this show. So the next episode for next week is called Tyson, which I'm assuming, judging by the promo, it's going to be focusing on his funeral and how everybody is grappling with that. But we're not even halfway through the season and this kid is like confirmed dead, so I don't know what the whole rest of this show is going to be doing. I'm assuming it's just going to be showing Murphy running around Chicago trying to find out who killed him, because what else would it be showing? However, throughout this entire episode, everybody keeps making fun of Dean because he's looking at Murphy like he has feelings for her and he really likes her, and friends don't look at each other like that. And of course, she doesn't know, she can't see him looking at her, and the bartender even says the same thing, and she makes fun of him because he clearly has feelings for Murphy, even though he's out on a date with the bartender. Like everybody, even the female detective, Jules, whatever, like everybody knows that he likes her, and Chloe and everybody, and he's just in complete denial, like, oh, we're friends, it's fine, whatever. Which, like, come on, really? The episode ends briefly with Darnell and Jules, and they're back at Jules's apartment, and he had gotten takeout to try and make up for the incident that had happened earlier, and everything's fine. But this was kind of underwhelming, like the entire thing. It only got really fast-paced near the end when she was in the flower shop. So I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of this week's episode. Felix's mom was awful to him, and she had made a comment.
Actually, Felix works really hard, too.
Just don't.
Yes, I know. He's always telling me how busy it is over at the pet store.
It's actually not a pet store. It's a major nonprofit that provides service to animals to over 500 people every year, myself included.
Look, way to go. I mean, obviously, Felix's parents never really paid much attention to him growing up, and even aren't still doing that now, and that he was very close to this uncle because his mom was just always doting on his siblings, and he said that his father was always working. And he's understandably very upset that his uncle was dying. So Jess had gone back to talk to him, and they reconciled, and she made him food and everything was okay. And then meanwhile Murphy is like witnessing another murder for the second time this season, basically. We'll have to see what happens. I'm interested to find out who killed him. I'm pretty sure it's somebody that works for Darnell, or that guy who's in prison, whatever his name is. And I don't care what Max says, he has to know something. Because he's clearly very involved with this whole scheme that's going on, even though he's like lying to Darnell and all the other people that he's still, seeing Murphy or whatever. He's got to know something, because like he gives them money and he lets them use his truck for whatever it is, even though he doesn't want to be involved in anything. I don't know, we'll have to see. I'll see you guys next time.